So I wanted to welcome, this is Fran Snyder, everybody. This is the founder of Concerts in Your Home, somebody that I've known for a long time and have worked with for a long time. Very good man, very good businessman, and an innovator in this kind of crazy time of the music business that I think even started before, obviously, we all went on lockdown. I mean, obviously, the business has been changing so much. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about first your background. I want to introduce you to everybody. Tell everybody, tell us about the company, but also about your background, how you started, and what brought you to do concerts in your home.
Okay, thanks. It's great to reconnect with you. So I started playing music in the early mid '90s, and did my I paid my dues in the coffee houses and bars and doing every kind of gig there was for a good long time until I discovered house concerts, probably in the early 2000s. Trying to think. Yeah, early 2000s. I was in Atlanta at the time, and I was touring. I was on the college circuit, which is kind of how you and I sort of originally connected through Auburn Moon, Nancy Oswine. You had been one of her clients before I joined on her roster. And so I had heard about house concerts, for years, but it was kind of like this little secret of the folk music community, people that were playing folk festivals. And it just had this really kumbaya vibe to it that I just didn't quite resonate, because I still wanted to be I wanted to be the next Peter Gabriel,
Right.
And so even though
and you can't do that in someone's living room necessarily.
Well,
right?
I've seen people do it, but I had really grandiose ambitions about how I was going to deliver music. But the reality was, as I was driving around in the Jeep Cherokee playing with my acoustic guitar, and so this vision that I had of becoming the next big rock star or something wasn't meshing with the reality. And if your reality is that you're playing acoustic music, writing your own songs, not getting radio airplay of any significance, then house concerts, once you discover them, you either get it or you don't. I mean, it's not the right thing for everybody. There's a lot of people who are super uncomfortable being that intimate with an audience, or being that close to the audience physically, or if you're staying with the host for any significant amount of time, if you're staying overnight especially, the challenge of being on 24/7, of being, you can't fully be yourself when you're a guest in someone's home, right? And so
let me maybe stop you there, because I would love to explain to certain people maybe who are watching this who don't fully understand the concept of the house concert. You're right. It's something that a lot of us were kind of doing on the DL. It wasn't necessarily an organized thing. Fans would maybe say, hey, listen, I would love to have you come and play for friends of mine, or we have a little venue downstairs, or even if it was just something in their living room, like, the way that this whole thing started, and you'd sit with your acoustic guitar. Sometimes there'd be a sound system, sometimes there weren't, but there wasn't. But what was great about it is that a lot of artists were figuring out a way to tour the country, but have places to stay, almost like a bed and breakfast kind of situation. And you were kind of playing, right? And the host would pay you based on sometimes donations, or sometimes after a while they would start charging maybe $10 a head, or they would pass a hat or whatever it was. But at the very least, like you said, we'd have a place to stay, and we'd maybe get a meal or two, and then you could go and play sometimes these clubs where there really wasn't a lot of money necessarily, or there wasn't enough money to get a hotel room per se. And it ended up being this amazing strategy to sort of get across the country. But you're right. I think you had to be okay with being in people's houses who maybe you had only just met, maybe at a show or through email or online.
Right. And I think, without getting into too much detail on that front, there's certain people who just, they really need to be in their own space. Things have changed, like smoking's not really acceptable in anybody's house anymore. So if you're a smoker, being in somebody else's space is really tough. if you're, a drinker or a non-drinker and you can't kind of go with the flow of what's going on around you, that can put other
Totally.
types of pressure on you when you're staying in people's homes. And plus, you might occasionally have, emotional drama. You're staying with a family sometimes, and,
I
whether
know.
that's a
Well, I will
baby
tell you that
waking up
like
the next morning. Yeah.
one of the things that I sort of laugh about, Mark was, you might have seen him when we were having some technical difficulties. My
Mhm.
boyfriend, Mark, who all of my fans know, he peeked his head in to try to help me. Mark and I have often laughed about some of these house concerts that I still do and that I love. And the fans, I have fans that
Yeah.
still call me to come and do them now and then. But there've been a few that we've done together where the host, becomes very attached to being close to the artist and wanting to know everything
Yeah.
about you and being in your life. And then it becomes
Yeah.
a little bit of a gossipy situation about other artists.
Yeah.
And you find yourself sort of in this very strange, cliquey environment where this host
Yeah.
is friends and fans with a particular artist or a particular handful of artists, and you have to behave a certain way in order for that host to like you, and you've got to be very much in their life, and they have to feel like they know you very well and that they're your friend and they can call you personally, and they don't want to go through your website anymore. And there's like some, you know what I mean, there's like
Yeah.
that stuff that goes on too that I've never really subscribed to and I haven't really loved, because your website is beautiful because it's this middleman where the hosts can be rated by the artists, and artists can leave comments and you know where you're headed. And then same thing for the host can understand what kind of artist this is and what kind of show they put on, and everybody, it's full disclosure. And I think that has been a really good thing to create that safe space that I think you're talking about.
Yeah, I think what's missing especially when you're doing a lot of house concerts with your fans, first timers, they're not walking into a culture that they know, and you're bound as the artist, you're bound to get a lot more surprises, and sometimes these boundary challenges, like you pointed out, like some people just like, okay, I'm here to play a show. I'm not here to be your best friend. And
Yes.
a lot of that stuff happens supernaturally, and there's no issues. But sometimes you get people who are, a little too enthusiastic, we'll put it. But in terms
Yeah.
of being in a community of house concerts, in a community of artists, there are these norms that come about. There is the safety, the social validation thing where people recommend each other. And after I play your house, you'll write a review for me, and I'll write a review for you. And 90% of the
It's
time,
great.
it's great. There's no issues. But then you notice that there might be a host who's had 12 artists play there, and there's no recommendations, and you're like, okay. But they want me to
Right.
play there. Maybe I can reach out to those artists and say, hey, what's up? What's going on? And then, so you've got
Sure.
this community protection. And obviously, if anything, is dangerous or totally unethical, then those people get removed from the site. But the beautiful
Definitely.
thing is there's this positive peer pressure when you build a community, which
Yeah.
by just that pressure alone eliminates 99% of the issues that can come up. The
Oh no,
fact
and
that,
it's true. I've met the most wonderful people through your site. I mean,
yeah,
particularly the house concert in Hickory, Rufus, has become
yeah,
like
yeah,
a family member to me.
right,
And I know you know him. That's why you're smiling, because he's a very
yeah,
well known one of these hosts that does these. He's got a
yeah,
beautiful venue, and this is what starts to happen: is that these hosts become so serious that they build stages and have beautiful sound systems, and there's lighting, and it just becomes like a full concert venue that's
yeah,
almost better than the venues in the area. And it becomes such a pleasure, and I will know Rufus, I think,
yeah,
probably for the rest of my life, because you end up meeting these amazing music enthusiasts who really are
right,
just lovers of the craft, and just really good
yeah,
people. He and his wife Cindy both. Yeah.
yeah. I think this community, what we've built, attracts this type of person, and not
Yeah.
everybody fits. Certainly, not everybody fits the mold that Rufus comes from, but
Right.
the idea is that we help them connect, and we help reinforce these uh, these sentiments and these values. And so, even, a new host who doesn't 100% get it the first time, they start going to other house concerts in their area. They make friends. They see what's working, what's not working in other shows. And all of a sudden you've got this positive cycle of reinforcement where everybody's kind of learning from each other and going, okay, that's how they do it. So that's an important thing. But you touched on something. I'll just wrap up the story about how this started, and then I want to make a point about public venues.
Okay.
So I fell in love with playing these types of shows, and in the early 2000s, there wasn't a good site to promote the idea and to inspire people to get involved. And so I was searching on Google, like house concerts in Dallas, house concerts in, Knoxville, and 90% of the information that I found was a waste of time. Either the email address was wrong, or it was a host who did one show 5 years ago and hasn't hosted one since, but nobody ever takes anything off the internet once it's there, so they look like an active house concert. So I was so frustrated with that I was doing this research. I said, somebody needs to build something, and then of course, I guess I need to build something, and I knew nothing about web design, so I hired a guy to help me out, and I've been hiring guys to help me out for 20 years now, or 15 years, I guess we've been at it. And it started as Concerts in Your Home.
Undertaking, because you have to kind of have data. I mean, it's a big because I dated a web developer for years and years. We were together for like 8 years. So I know a website like that is not easy to build. I mean, that must have been quite an undertaking, because you need to have the host side, the artist side, and then people connecting and putting in a request and then being approved or denied, and then the conversation between the artist and it's quite a ordeal.
We invested, I invested probably at this point maybe $7,000 just in the evaluation process for artists joining. So when an artist tries to join our network, they give us 2 videos and a link to their website, and that application gets accessed by hosts in our network who volunteer their time to give written feedback on your videos and on your website to let you know what's working and what's not. And then we have professionals that also review the artists and make sure that that some professional standards are met in terms of the review process. Because you could occasionally get a host who says, "Oh, I like him. He's cute." Okay, no, that's not what we're looking for. Because they're not, they're not music professionals. They're not music professionals, a lot of them, but they know what they like. And I don't want an artist to join our site based on my taste and then find out that none of the hosts are into what he's doing. And so I've taken money from an artist. They don't get gigs because their materials don't appeal to enough hosts. So we've invested a lot in this process to make sure that artists who join our network actually have can actually be making a good investment. So, anyway,
and not just anybody on that thought. Not just anybody can join, right? So there's a little bit of a vetting process. So an artist has to submit, and then certain hosts, like super hosts, almost evaluate that particular artist.
Yeah, it's a curated community, and it might be. I think it is probably the only website that has more opportunities than artists. If you go to a music conference or whatever, there's 2,000 artists chasing 100 gigs. And on our website, once you're in as an artist, there's actually more hosts than there are artists. And so that's a balance that we want to keep and even expand, so that, it is challenging to get in our network, but once you're in, you're not, one of 1,000 acts trying to get a particular house concert. So
that's right.
So this thing has been growing, but as you mentioned, it started as Concerts in Your Home, but about 5 or 6 years ago, we changed it to Listening Room Network. And a big part of that is that number one, we already had a lot of house concerts who were really in the basement of a church, or they were really doing it at a coffee house, but it was a house concert model. They were doing a suggested donation and all that stuff, but it wasn't a house. But also, we also realized that we need to support public venues. because as much as I adore house concerts, uh, public venues offer something different and necessary for artists to grow at their craft. And we don't want those places to go out of business just because house concerts are thriving. So we changed it to the listening room network. And the standard there, venues also get vetted, and it has to be a listening room. We're not trying to list every coffee house, every bar that has live music. There's plenty of websites that do that. We're curating on both sides, saying we consider these opportunities to be worthwhile if you're an artist who wants to make a living wage and needs to play for an attentive audience. So, a listening audience and a living wage is really sort of our core value. So essentially, so that catches us up in terms of how the website, how I got into this and how the website became Listening Room Network.
And how did you market to artists? I'm just curious because I found it for the very same way that you ended up building the website was that I went solo once I left my band and realized that this house concert thing was something that people were really starting to do quite a bit. And I was starting to notice certain artists that I was either friends with or, was keeping an eye on their career that were similar to me, were doing these house concerts. And then I started to notice, oh, they belong to this thing. And starting to search and then finding your website and being like, oh my God, it's FRAN. Check it out. So I reached out to you. Yeah. And you know what? I went through the process like everybody. Just because I knew you didn't mean that I automatically was allowed in. And I completely appreciated that. And it was a very fair process. And I was lucky enough to get into the network and had a lot of success and had this same thing that you just said. There was a particular concert in Atlanta that was a church, and it was in a venue in a church, and they gave me a place to stay, and it was a great venue, and it was like a coffee house setting. So it wasn't someone's home necessarily, but you're right. It was just a listening room, and it ended up being great. And so, the shows did exactly that. They helped me get sort of from A to B and tied together a lot of maybe opening shows that weren't going to pay that great, but they were really good exposure gigs. But somebody gave me a really good, and I'll tell you, I made more money sometimes doing those concerts, those house concerts, than I did anything else. And I think people will tell you that. I mean, if I ran into anything, it was that by the time I joined the network, there were so many of the kind of coveted spots were booked like a year out or 2 years out. It would be tough to book your summer if you called them too late.
Right. So, we're sort of in the business of inspiring new house concert hosts and helping them get started, find good artists so that they can keep their audience coming back and develop a following. And as you know, some hosts like Rufus hit it out of the park and they're just naturals at it. And they, and what happens is there's a grapevine, right? Like we're not going to suppress Rufus and say, you can only book artists in our network. The word gets out, you play his place, you play his place, and you might tell him. Right. And so the idea is there's a natural there's a grapevine thing that sort of takes over when a host is really exceptional. And so a lot of these hosts, start getting calls from agents and that kind of thing. And so there's always a balance of, I'm on the hook for providing enough value to these hosts to the point where they still want to stay engaged, even though they might be booking talent outside of our network sometimes. Right. They still value the relationship with our website. They still value the vetting process. They know that if an artist comes from our website, that doesn't mean they're automatically going to like them, but there's a much better chance that it's going to be a professional with a record of touring, with some great songs and some appealing material, and videos that make sense for a house concert host. Just to sort of wrap up the whole evaluation process. We've had artists that had 5 top 10 hits in the 70s and 80s who applied and were turned down. Not because they weren't great, but they had video that just did not make sense. And it's like, okay, it's two of the original members of the band in the video, but those aren't the two that are touring, or or like only half of those two are touring, and it's another guy, and it's like, no, we need a video that's honest. The hosts want to know who's coming to their house, what they're going to sound like, what their personality might be like, right? And that's what the video needs to show. So nobody gets a free pass in our network, and it's amazing. It's like,
it was hard for me too. I have to say, not to interrupt you, but it was hard for me too, because I came from a full band and I was going into being an acoustic artist and didn't have a lot of material yet that showed that, and trying to sort of come up with that quickly, and was very lucky because it was like I had a couple of things, but people definitely said we need to see more stuff that like shows what the show is going to be. And I agree. And I think, being somebody who was in a very successful, band for a long time, you have to show what the next thing is. People, they don't necessarily want to see you when you were 20 if you're 50 now, and they don't want to necessarily see, right? It's like, listen, some of us still look okay. It's like, take a picture of yourself and like put it up there. Like, this is like, it is what it is, It's like, I'm not my 20-year-old self, but it's not that bad, And so trying not to be kind of reliant upon those days, It was great. It was awesome. I loved every minute of it, but I've done plenty since. And frankly, I'm sort of retiring into a different part of the business, this being one thing, and some other, I'm doing some acting, but it's funny because you do see it. You see artists show photos of themselves, 20 years ago, and you just think, like, you've got to be real about where you're at and what you're doing, because people are going to see a 20-year-old photo of yourself, and then you're going to walk in and you're going to be in your 50s, and people are just not going to be okay with that. I don't.
Well, it used to be.
I wanted to say it's a happy hour show. I just want to say cheers to you real quick. Happy hour. I keep forgetting cheers. Let's have a little drink to that.
So just to button up that point, one of my favorite things is that when an artist applies and doesn't get in, and 6 months later, 3 months later, sometimes a year later, they come back, they apply, and they have great video, and they've done exactly the work that was recommended to them in their evaluations. They get in and they succeed, and then they tell me not only are they happy that they got into the website, but the effort that they put into those videos is helping them in their career well outside of our network. It used to be that, a business card was your business card. Then as an artist, your website became your business card. And now your business card is your videos. That is job one. If you're an artist, once you've got good songs, you need video. We need to see what you look like live. And if you can't perform those songs live in a decent way, then God help you, because you're not going to make money off Spotify.
No, you're not. And you're so right. And it's so funny, it kind of brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, is the way that the music industry has changed, and what it was when we all started. And even then, like I talk a lot now about how I think Antigone Rising may have been like the last band to get a publishing deal, like pretty much, over a certain money point. Like nobody really makes the kind of living that you were able to make anymore, like as a signed artist, or getting record deals like we used to get, or, publishing deals like we used to get. And then learning how to translate that and become a touring band, and then translate that into being somebody who could sit on a stool because you can't necessarily afford a band. And then now translating that into somebody who can create content on the internet and what that looks like, and sort of learning about social networking. And so in this new sort of crazy time where obviously we're all on lockdown, and, hopefully we'll be out sooner than later on some level, you and I even just, I think over email, said that I don't know that live venues, particularly ones, that are going to be bringing a lot of people in to see an artist, are going to be back up and running anytime soon. What do you see as the next phase? I mean, we've done a couple of house concerts online, and they were great. We did a couple of Friday nights and they were very well attended, like 5,000 people, I think, tuned in, and that was amazing. Unexpected, but I think everybody's home. So I think that that's part of why there were so many eyes on it. Do you think that that's where your company, are you going to offer online concerts? Are you going to host things like that? What do you think is next for the company?
Well, for us, I mean, there's a couple of things at play right now, and it's a little early to tell what exactly is going to happen. But I think the link that I sent you, I wrote just a short blog post that I think house concerts are going to lead us into the music recovery, right? They're going.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to instantly go to 5,000 seat shows or even 500 seat shows for a while. It's going to have to start small, and I think it's going to have to start local. I mean, as an artist, if you're booking stuff in a hurry, you're not going to book a 500-mile trip. You need to stay local for a while, just in case things get shut back down and you're not incurring these, airfares and travel expenses and all these kinds of things. So we're looking at, as a company, looking to enable the stuff that makes the most sense. And people are itching to go to live music, and they're itching to play live music. And so, we're coming up with sort of like standards of like maybe, whenever the host feels it's safe for them, whenever it's okay, according to their city officials or state officials or whatever. But I think the way to start is, outdoors if you can, making sure that people have room to spread out. And if indoors, you should be at maximum like 50% of your capacity before. So if you had a room that would sit 40 people, then you really need to cap it at 20, at least for your first couple of events until things get better. But, one of the challenges with house concerts is that a big part of our demographic is seniors. These are the people that grew up buying records. These are the people with disposable income. And these are our biggest fans. And we have to look out for them. And so we need to be conservative in terms of, yes, we want to, as soon as we get the green light, we want to at least look at planning some small events and doing them as safely as possible. So what does that look like, right? So you got capacity. Maybe you have to scrap the potluck dinner for a while so that people aren't grabbing common food. Maybe you space the seats a little further apart. And there's all kinds of things, maybe you keep some Lysol in the bathroom or any close quarters so people can kind of wipe stuff down after they're done. So we want to set some guidelines for that. In terms of promoting live streams, we did we sort of opened up a channel on our website itself. It's public, so it's not anybody can see it. You just go to listeningroomnetwork.com, click on live streams.
Okay.
And that
we'll put
actually
it up too. We'll put it up after this.
Thanks. It's basically a schedule of artists in our network who are doing live streams, and their times are there. And it says be a sponsor. And so even if you're not sure you can watch the show, you can actually sponsor a show ahead of time. And we've actually had people donate a couple grand to allow us to send like a $50 stipend to each of the artists in our network when they list a live stream on our calendar. So we're trying to enable some of that sort of giving. So, so we're not only trying to send an audience to the live stream so that you have people watching, but we're also trying to get some money for you on top of whatever you're going to make off of your payment links. So that's been kind of cool. It's one of the things. Thanks. I mean, it's really modest. Great. I mean, I'm sending like $50 payments, but
but you're thinking about it, and you feel a part of the community, I mean, I think the nice thing about as an artist working with and for someone like yourself is that you are also an artist. You know what it is to be, like you said, in the Cherokee, driving around the country, trying to sing for your supper, and you understand, how scary it probably is right now for those of us who have earned our living as touring artists, and you're absolutely right. My fan base has always been of a certain age, even when I was, when I was doing it with my band. I mean, it was always people who liked classic rock music. And yeah, we had younger fans
Right.
too, but for the most part, like this symphony show I'm doing that we discussed. I mean,
Yeah.
the symphony show Women Rock that I'm doing right now, it's seniors, people older, because that's who can afford a symphony ticket, you know, and that's why all of these shows are canceled. And this has been my bread and butter for a really long time. So kind of
Yeah.
the consistent paycheck for a while. And those shows are
Yeah.
postponed indefinitely. And
Yeah. Well, I will say
it's
that
a
in terms
really
of the,
uncertain time.
yeah, I think artists need to prepare for more than a couple of months. I think
Yeah.
this could drag on for a while. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have certain regions or cities or metro areas of the country that are going to open up and then close back down again. You know, it's like, okay, we're doing
Mhm.
great. Oh, no, now it's coming back. Oh, no, I think we're going to have a lot of this kind of seesaw thing happening for a while. My hope is that, hopefully by fall, some of that starts to resolve. But I think we're in for a pretty rough summer. And I think, again, there's still so much that we have to learn about this virus and how it spreads and how lethal it is. There's such insufficient data right now that anybody who says they know exactly what's going on, they're lying or they're full of it.
I completely
But
agree. I'm in New
yeah,
York, so we feel really
yeah,
lucky with Como. It's like Como has just been taking the lead on this thing, regardless of anybody's politics, like not trying
yeah,
to impose that on anyone. But I will say that it's been very nice to be in a state with,
right,
the governor who absolutely has kind of been keeping everybody
yeah,
informed. And it's the first thing that he says. He's like, I'm not going to lie to you. Here are the facts. Like, we actually
right.
don't know. And I think you're right. Like, I was curious about that. So with your company, I mean, what do you think? Will you set those guidelines? Will you at some point just sort of say, we'll allow concerts to go on? Like, have you shut
No,
concerts down?
no. So we've never been an enforcer other than, if you don't meet certain minimum standards in our network in terms of, if your place is not safe or if it's not clean or if there's, boundary
Right.
issues like you mentioned before, like,
Yeah.
that's just been extremely rare. And we're not the house concert police, but what we want to
Right.
do is give the best advice we can, but we also want to learn from our community. And so next week I'm scheduling sort of like one of these Zoom calls with a handful of the hosts in our network so we can talk and brainstorm and say, what I mentioned again, some of the points I made earlier about limiting capacity and getting rid of the buffet. I want to hear what our hosts have to say about that, what
Right.
creative solutions they might have, and then share that information. So yeah, we're not going to be looking at this as, certainly not as an enforcement type of thing, but like, here's what we're learning, here's what we're going to share with you. You make the decision that's best for you and the artists that you're working with. Um, there's a lot. Again, there's in terms of COVID-19 and the economy. The people who are saying, "Hey, we need to open up," we're doing more devastation by keeping the economy shut. That's not a hollow argument. There are some really, really awful things happening because we're shut down, and
Right.
uh, but it's not a zero sum thing. You can't choose one over the other. We have to find sort of that middle ground. Yes, we clamp down hard for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, but at some point, you're not going to get the population to stay home. We need each other. We need to do things. We need to live. And at some point, more and more people are going to say, you know what? I've done my time. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to go hit
Yeah.
baseballs with my kid. I'm going to do,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Those things are going to start becoming more and more prevalent as the months roll on. And hopefully
Definitely.
hopefully there'll be some herd immunity going on. Hopefully there'll be a vaccine in progress. Hopefully, I think the one thing nobody talks about is that hospitals are going to get better at treating this and handling it
Yeah.
and being prepared for it.
Definitely.
Um,
Right.
so I think over time, this disease is going to get less and less lethal.
Well, so
Maybe
I
not
was
less dangerous.
watching.
Yeah.
Right. But I watched a really interesting report last night, in fact, about Sweden. and how Sweden has decided to not really enforce the social distancing. It's not, I wouldn't say laws, but social distancing suggestions from their government,
Right.
and that they feel like more deaths maybe now will lead to less deaths later, and that their feeling is that to sort of put everybody on lockdown now, and to tell everybody to shut down the government, shut down the economy now, that actually it's doing almost as much damage as the disease itself, and that they feel like if they open up the economy, and they open up all the businesses, and then in 6 months they have to tell us to all shut it down again, that actually that would be more devastating than to keep everything open, which is what they've decided to do. And I'm not saying I have an opinion either way. I just thought it was interesting to keep everything open, to not enforce social distancing, and to let people sort of get sick, to create this herd immunity that you were talking about. And that at some point, maybe they wouldn't, if they do have to close down, that they would just have to do it once, and that it would be maybe down the line or not at all, because they've decided to do it this way. And that they actually thought that shutting everything down and literally destroying the economy is as bad a solution, as allowing people to sort of get this thing and get sick, and see if they resolve or don't resolve. I thought it was such an interesting argument.
Yeah, but imagine if New York would approach it like that.
Forget it. And I'm so glad I'm not in the city anymore. We just left Brooklyn. I mean, we just left Brooklyn. I mean, like 3 months, 4 months ago. Yeah. So the fact that we're not there is a miracle.
Yeah, I think that, one thing is for sure is like there's no hard answers. Every community has their own limitations. Every community has their own resources, and their St. Petersburg doesn't have public transportation. Riding the subway is probably one of the riskiest things you can do during an epidemic, right? So New York has unique problems when it comes to epidemic type things, and I think every city, every metro area is going to have to learn and plan according to their own strengths and weaknesses. If you have plenty of beds, plenty of doctors, then you can try different things, but if you're a country like, Italy or some, sub-Saharan Africa where there are no ICUs available, you can't take those kinds of risks because you'll decimate your hospital staffs and that kind of stuff. So again, there's no hard answers. Anybody who pretends to know, we're going to learn a lot more. But for me, in terms of artists, I want to shift the discussion to how can we make a career in music more resilient? And that's really something that, all kinds of companies, all kinds of industries are going to have to look at is, I never want to be surprised like this again. I never want to be caught without 2 months worth of income ever again. I've been for many years, I've been running my business like an artist, and just like, here's what I want to build, and I'll figure out how to pay for it later. And, just like, you make a record. Yeah. And so, I'm not an idiot, but I did not have a stockpile of cash in case my company got zero income for 2 months. Right. Which is exactly what I'm facing. So, we have, I can't ask artists to renew their membership right now. There's no way. So, it's like, okay, everybody gets a 2-month pass and we'll see, I'll figure out how to make this work. But I think, certainly I'm not unique in this position. I mean, major multi-billion-dollar companies have been caught with their pants down, right? They've been buying back their shares instead of keeping some cash on hand for emergencies. And now everybody's scrambling. So I think as artists, this idea of treating touring more like a working vacation, like, hey, it's okay if I don't make money. I got to see Europe and I played some shows. That kind of stuff's, it's going to go away unless you're independently wealthy. This idea of like, hey, I'm just, I've always wanted to tour Europe, and there's a handful of shows at Listening Room Network, and I got a couple of bookings, and I'll add some coffee houses, and if I don't make a profit, it's all right, I'll get to see Europe. Well, I don't think that that's something that artists are going to be doing for a while. I think everything's going to
No.
have to make sense, and I think the best thing that artists can do is to focus on their local region. That will keep them flexible and nimble. And back to the point about doing small shows, the beautiful thing for me, the most wonderful thing that house concerts do is they make small events meaningful. And I mean meaningful not just from an enjoyment perspective, but from a money perspective. And so, playing for 25 people at a house concert, you'll make more than if you played for 50 people at a coffee house, right?
No question.
And so the idea that house concerts can allow you to play for small crowds, guess what? That's what you're going to get for the next 6 months is small crowds. So house concerts are going to be this seriously important lifeline to the extent that we can keep them going or actually restart them. But they're certainly going to be the first things to restart. And small gatherings like that, you might not be making $1,000 a show anymore. You might make $200, $300, $400, but you're not going to be paying $3 a gallon to drive to Iowa. So you kind of have to embrace what's in front of you. It's like, okay, listen, if I can do small shows, if I can make certainly if you're doing live streams, you can make more from a small house concert than most people are making off their live streams. So why not play for 15, 20 people in different houses in your greater metro area? And the fact that these events can be small means you're not beating up your audience. You're not trying to get them to go to a different show every week because the hosts are the ones gathering the audience for you. It's their house. And it's their friends.
For me, I mean, to stop you there, like that, I think was the most amazing part about it was that, so you have this house concert opportunity, and really 90% of the time, you're not really under the gun to fill the room. The house concert does that. They choose you. The people that come to see their shows trust their taste in music, whether they've heard of you or not. Some have, some haven't. But the people who come and watch these shows are really more fans of the host of the concerts themselves, because they know that you're going to bring something in that we're going to enjoy.
Absolutely.
And and so you're not under the gun and under the stress of having to fill these rooms. Because I'll tell you, one of the things that I've really struggled with when I went solo was the fact that I was no longer in this sort of heavy rock band anymore. And there were a lot of people that were, wanting to see that. So I was starting over in a lot of ways. There were people who maybe didn't know that I was writing all of that music for Antigone Rising, even though it was brought to a band. All of that stuff was written on an acoustic guitar. And so now I wanted to sort of bring these songs to the audience the way that they were written, but that wasn't the way people were used to hearing them. So I needed to start over, and I was getting in front of new people. And it was so nice to walk into a room full of people who probably most hadn't heard of me before and were really being introduced to me and to my music as is, without any preconceived notions, without any kind of, and really just receiving the work, just the way that it was being performed. And it was awesome for me. And it kind of opened up this whole world for me, definitely. But what I wanted to talk to you about and ask your opinion on it, I think that there is a specific kind of artist that does very well in this sort of an atmosphere. I mean, what do you think for somebody who wants to maybe get into this? What would you say the hosts are looking for, and what kind of maybe disposition you have to have in order to be doing shows like this? It's a very different, especially for somebody who maybe came from a band or came from a situation where they were backstage and then they were on stage and they went backstage and they got into their van or their bus and they left. Like there's a very different sort of ethos and a different sort of sensibility that I think you have to have in order to do these house concerts. I mean, what do you think? What would be your advice?
Yeah, I think if you grew up in the rock and roll world where you're trying to fill, 800 square feet of stage with your ego, you have to be bigger than life when you step on stage with lights, and that's a particular mindset that you have to get comfortable with when you're doing rock and roll. And there are very few artists who can pull off that vibe in somebody's living room and not look like a ridiculous person. So I think, there's a thing about house concerts that there's this craving for authenticity, and people can like sense right away if you're full of shit. If you think you're bigger than this and you shouldn't be playing for only 20 people, and don't they know who you've opened for? All these things. I think the pretense gets old really fast when you're staying in someone's home. So so I think authenticity is huge. I forget who had the joke, but it's like authenticity is very important. If you can fake that, you've got it made. Something like that. But
yeah. That's so great, right? Exactly. Well, it's funny because I know certain artists who are so beautiful in the room, who like make great records and are great in a band, but also when you get them in the room, they really tell their stories and they engage people and they're very present and they really feel the music. And then I've also seen people who have an amazing resume, who have unbelievable voices, who, their pedigree, probably can't be competed with, but really can't connect. That there's just something, there's a missing fact. And you're right. It's authenticity, it's honesty, it's vulnerability, it's a willingness to bring yourself into the room in front of the people that you're singing to, and understanding that every single one, because you're right. I think that you can get in your head about the size of the audience or where you've been and what, but what you forget is that your entire career is based off of that one person that fell in love with you, that one person that bought the record, that one person that sings all the words. It's just it's only about that one person anyway. And that one person can take your music to so many people, and that little fire, that little spark can grow into a blaze. And I learned that in my band, and it's still the way that I feel. And I think you're right. But I think the one thing that I've noticed with certain people is just to remember to connect, and to remember that as much as we think that people want us to be bigger and larger than life, that actually in this atmosphere, they want to feel connected to you, and that they actually respond a lot better if you really genuinely try to connect with them.
Yeah, I think, to that point, if you can, and it doesn't have to be through the whole show, but if you can consciously have a conversation with someone in the audience, instead of looking at the audience as this blob, this one unit, when you can see an individual in that crowd and say something to them or hear them, or that actually pulls in people, instead of making them feel excluded. It actually it creates a deeper connection with the whole audience when you connect with one person more deeply. And I think
definitely
I have so many pet peeves about house concerts, because I've seen so many of them. But to me, that's something that never fails, is connecting deeply. But I will tell you my negative pet peeve about house concerts. House concerts, the audiences are so sweet that they can make you very lazy as a performer. And I see a lot of artists fall into a pattern of, here's the story about my next song, here's my next song. Here's the story about my next song, here's my next song. It's talk, sing, talk, sing. And they will do that the entire night without ever breaking, without ever put two songs together. At some point, if you have some upbeat material, you have it is hard to get people rocking with an acoustic guitar. But if you manage to do it, At the end of 3 minutes, don't give that up. Go right into your next upbeat song. Milk that energy while you can. You've done all that work to get them there. Keep them there for a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And to me,
There's
that's
definitely people
if
too
you
that I notice, like, it's their job. Like, you can see, like, I've done a couple of these with people where maybe I'm sharing the bill with them and they come in. It's like, I do these all the time. And like, I'm the guy that everybody wants to book for these things. And this is how I do it. And it's all very like, it's just like very strange, you know, where for me, it's like, I still feel like I'm going to like somebody's house and I'm so happy to be there. And like, I just want the host to be happy and I want their friends to be happy. And I'm very sort of, you know, tiptoeing like the way that my mother sort of raised me to be in someone's home. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, don't like bring something and be very sort of humble. And I've noticed that there's a little bit of like the kingpins of this world who come like sort of strutting in with like their whole family and like the dog and like the whole, and everybody comes into this like house concert and needs to get out of their way. And
I think one of the powerful things that you can do as an artist is knowing that, you know, a host only books 6 to 12 shows a year. Most of them are not going to have you back the following year. It's rare. Unless it's a brand new host. If you're playing for a brand new host, you're taking a risk. But if you kill it, if you do a great show and they love you, you could be the one person that they have back every year. And for me, when I go play a house concert, that's how I approach it. Is like, you know, how can I be so good? And that doesn't mean playing every note perfectly, but how can I be, you know, such a great experience in their home that they're going to say, you know what, I want to make this a tradition. We want Fran Snyder in our house once a year. You know, and if you get a handful of those types of people.
The ones that I do are the ones I've done twice or 3 times. I don't do a lot of new ones. I've done a lot of the same ones over and over. I've been very lucky in that way. And you're right. I think they take it very personally. You're in their home and they're introducing you to their wives and their children and their friends and their neighbors. And if you're gracious and you're warm and you're respectful, I think that they really appreciate that. You know, I mean, as they should, and as you should always be very respectful in somebody's home and understand that it is their home. And
and I think there's a couple of artists. I'll give like 2 tips for artists who are like kind of getting into this. There is an opportunity to, you know, to recognize the fact that you're a guest in somebody's house. And I gotta tell you, the classiest act that I've seen from artists, and it doesn't happen often, but, you know, maybe once a year, an artist will show up with something like, here are some cookies baked, or cookies that you can only get in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I'm from, or here's a bottle of wine, or like, I wanted to bring you a gift because you have done this work for me to bring an audience to me in a market where I don't have a following. And you're encouraging all your friends to, you know, give me $20 each, even though they've never heard of me before. And when an artist shows up and says thank you right when they walk in the door, here's what I want to do for you, that's huge. And then a great trick to cement that, or in addition to, or either or, but I know an artist years ago, it might have been Beth Wood, I'm not sure who it was, but they would have, whenever they went on tour, they would have a stack of postcards pre-addressed to the addresses that of the house concerts that they were going to play. And the following morning, when they're sitting in their car before they drive off, they fill out the postcard. Thank you so much. Had a great time. I love that particular moment that we had, you know, something that's specific to the thing. And then, you know, you could either pop it right into their own mailbox or, you know, or drop it in the mail a week later or whatever, but it's written, it's done. Your thank you has been, and so few artists do that. I mean, it's just an easy way to cement your relationship with a great host, you know?
I agree. And there are great hosts out there. And I, for one, am so appreciative of you because it did introduce me to some great people and gave me some amazing opportunities and created an income for me when I really needed one when I left my band. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for being on. This is a new podcast. And, you know, it was something, like I said, I was starting before this whole thing. So being willing to kind of put up with the technical difficulties and be a part of it, I really do appreciate it. I'm going to put up
Well, that's
all
all
of your
great.
social information and the website and stuff. We're going to put it
Super.
on the actual video, but is there anything else you want to
Okay.
maybe say or announce before we go?
No, I think, whoops, just unplugged my computer. I think really, I think there's two things I want to say before we wrap up. Actually, can I tell you one story?
Yes.
Before we wrap up, are we out of time?
So, of course. No, we're not out of time.
I got it. All right, so I got into this as an artist, and my frame of reference was like, oh my God, isn't this just incredible that these people are giving of themselves as music fans, doing all this stuff for us? Like, there was this presupposition that the artists are the one who are gaining and the hosts are the one who are giving. And a couple years ago, I started working on a book for house concerts, which I'll probably publish next year. And I did a lot of interviews with hosts and artists. And I was stunned by the stories of how much hosts get out of this. And of course, some of them are really thrilled to make friends who are artists and to become part of their careers. But there was one particular story that really just blew me away. And it's got this guy named Carl who lives in Missouri. He's an older guy. And his wife was in the hospital. And, the prognosis was, surgery went fine. But the doctor told him, after this surgery was done, it's like, Carl, I've seen this happen before. You're taking your wife home. And she's going to be, chair-bound for the rest of her life. She can't walk anymore. And it's going to be difficult for you to take her out into public and to visit her friends and to keep her connected to her community. As time goes by, she's going to want to stay home more and more. And you have to find a way to keep her connected with her friends and community if you want to keep her around. And Carl took that to heart, and he started a house concert series. And once a month, his wife in her chair sits by the door and greets everybody coming into the house. And it's the thing that she looks forward to all month long. And so I was interviewing Carl for this book, and he told me, he's like, Fran, I'll tell you this right now. He said, Fran, house concerts are literally keeping my wife alive. If it wasn't for these events where our community comes to us, I don't think that she would still be here today. And this was 3 years ago. And about 2 months ago, he sent me an email because he was complaining that the number of shows on the website was off. He's like, I've done 87 shows, but the website says I've only done 78. How can I fix that? And so I was like, 87 shows. He does one a month.
Amazing.
So, house concerts have been keeping his wife alive for a long time. So that was a huge moment for me. And it's easy to get, for me, especially day to day, to get hung up on the nuts and bolts and how do we deal with cancellations and, okay, this host doesn't quite get it, or this artist doesn't quite get it. And, you get stuck in the nuts and bolts, but then you pull back, you go, okay, there's something bigger at work here. You gotta look at the impact and the legacy that we're all building as a community of musicians and artists and fans. And that's something to be super, super grateful for, even if we have to take a break for 2 months, 5 months. It's going to come back. It might be a little different than what we're used to, but it's going to come back. And I think it's going to be probably, the tip of the spear in terms of getting the music economy going again. It can't help everybody, but it'll help the people that it can.
For sure. And I think you're right. I think I have just seen the most beautiful connection between people at these things. They bring covered dishes and everybody looks forward to it. And people are clamoring sometimes to get into this particular house concert because, the person will put the tickets up for sale and they'll be gone in 5 minutes. And then people will, I know when I was doing certain ones, my fans would write the host and say, please let me come and, can I come and see this artist? I'm a fan of this artist. And they've made extra chairs for some people that wanted to come. And it's been a really beautiful thing, and I love that you organized it, because I think not only does that create obviously an opportunity for artists, but just an opportunity to sort of organize all of it. And we know that when we book something through you, that we know we're going to a quality venue. They know they're getting a quality artist. I think that those things have been huge. And there are a lot of people that I know, great artists that are a part of that website. And then there's, people and places that I've never even heard of before. So it's introduced me to a ton of music too, and a ton of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm thrilled to reconnect with you. I hope we can do this again when you get the whole production going.
Definitely. We'd
I've
love
got
to
some
have
interesting
you.
stuff in the works. And I think the
Good.
next 6 months are going to be super interesting. We just have to weather the storm.
Good. We'd love to have you back. And I look forward to seeing what's next. Best of luck to you. Cheers one more time. Happy hour.
One more time.
And I will talk to you soon. Yeah. Cheers, cheers, cheers.
See you, Cassidy.
Bye.